Yeah,
Oh,
stop.
thank you.
Okay, so people can hear you.
It's like going to court.
Now, usually at these events, we give a long introduction to our speakers, since we have notorious people. We want you to know everything about them. But tonight, this is Bill Canavan, and Bill wants to introduce himself to you and tell you where he's coming from and who he is. And we really appreciate it, Bill, you coming all the way in from Fitchburg to do this program tonight, and especially the work you do. So we're all ears, ready to hear what you have to say.
Well, we'll do a short background before we get to Baystate Reentry Network and how it came about. As some of you already know, I spent decades in prison, more than 30 years. On July 31st, 2012, I was released from the Mass Treatment Center, and I came to live in Boston as a homeless person for 13 months. That was a rough road, I got to tell you the truth. I was 62 years old at the time, and you know, something I had never experienced before that in my life. During that time, I began to see that there was like no services available to people who had to register upon their release. Just nothing. There was St. Francis House. There was Committee for Public Counsel Services if you needed a lawyer. But there really wasn't too many formal things. And because I had been incarcerated for so many years, I kept running across people in Boston that I knew. And I guess the only benefit I had going into that is I never made any enemies in prison. I pretty much got along with everybody. I was in law libraries for years. I did things for them, so now you're their best friend, whatever the case may be. So I'd ask them, hey, where'd you get this? Where'd you get that? And then I would go to those places and meet somebody and say, hey, you know, this is my circumstance. I need help with this or that. And I got to say, I got the most help at St. Francis House. At the time, some of you may know, there was a gentleman there named Fred Smith, who is a saint. And it took me 23 days going back and forth between the registry, which was then over on Washington Street, and the Social Security office to get my Mass ID. I couldn't get a Social Security card or a Mass ID. Finally, at the Social Security office on Causeway Street, when I got denied again, I asked to see a supervisor. I told her my story. And I said, who could come in here and tell this lie? And she said, you know what, I believe you. And that started the process, and then Fred helped me get the rest done.
Yeah, but you didn't have any identification.
I didn't have anything. I didn't have anything. I didn't have any family, and all the things that you need to have, I didn't have. So if you don't have this, you can't get that, and you just keep running around in a circle. So it was a real trying time, but I developed a network of people that I could count on to ask, where can this be done? Where can that be done? And I kept going back to those people. At some point, I went to Boston University online and got a paralegal certificate. In fact, on the same day in September of 2013, I got my paralegal certificate, a housing grant from Home Start, and a job offer for Committee for Public Counsel Services. Oh, a miraculous day. Unfortunately, the job didn't turn out because the Department of Corrections wouldn't let me go back into facilities as a legal visitor. Turned out fine. I still wound up doing a lot of paralegal work for the private counsel division of Committee for Public Counsel Services. And I don't know, probably 50 trials I worked as a paralegal, and I probably testified as another 100. So I got a lot of court experience. And at the time, CPCS was paying paralegals a whopping $18 an hour. But that was enough for me, and it gave me enough money to help other people when they got out. The first trial that I worked on, I'll never forget it. The lawyer involved, I said, look, this would be wonderful if we could show the jury in a PowerPoint. He said, well, can you do that? I said, I don't know. And I played around with it for a while and got the hang of it. And that was the first time we started using PowerPoints. And it was a successful trial, a difficult trial to win. And he was the first guy that I helped. I didn't have a car then. I had nothing. I had to wait for him to get it to Boston. And then you walk people around, taking them here, there, the next place. And then eventually, when I got the housing grant, I moved to Attleboro. And then about a year after I got to Attleboro, I got my first car. Then I was mobile and off and running. Then I applied for assistance from Mass Rehabilitation. And they gave me a laptop, a wireless projector, screens, software license to my name, a whole bunch of stuff that enabled me to do PowerPoints at every trial. And it became a big thing at the time. Now I think the courtroom has the facility to do it right in the courtroom. You don't need to bring stuff in. And it just got better and better. Somewhere along the line, one of the attorneys coined the phrase, well, you're like the Boston Release Network. And that's how it came about. I'd like to tell you there was a plan. I had vision. I didn't have any of that. And it was action. I fell into it. And I felt good about what I was doing. The guys that I helped all felt good about it. And it was comforting to them to have somebody out there who already went through what they're going through. And I just learned more and more along the way. In 2016, the Criminal Justice Policy Coalition applied for a grant, and we actually got the grant. And the grant was from a foundation in Boston that's comprised of all family members who live all over the country. And they meet, one day a year, and then they dole out money. Well, they said, well, given what you do, we want to give the money anonymously. And I understand that. We're grateful for the money. And in between the first year and the second year of the grant, I got to meet with the family, which was really nice. I told a lot of stories, and they were moving stories. They really were. Thinking about them now, it moves me. And the father of the family pulled me aside and said, look, normally you have to wait for this. You'll get another grant. Don't worry about it. I went there with the director of CJPC, my attorney, and myself to present to the family. So anyway, that ran out in 2018. And at that point, we became our own nonprofit. And thereafter, we got criticism or feedback saying that you should change your name to Baystate Reentry. And we did. It all made sense. And once we became a nonprofit, we keep data, we keep all kinds of records. Our recidivism rate has continued to be extremely low, exceptionally low. And we are now, through the generosity of donations, we're able to provide everyone who gets out with a smartphone for 6 months, and we pay for it. We give them Charlie cards when needed. We give them a really, really nice backpack that is marketed by a company called City Pack that only sells to nonprofits. So everybody who sees this backpack in the shelters is, oh, why'd you get that? I want to get one of those. And it's not so simple. So we have to be careful with it, that our guys don't get victimized, or they don't figure out the reason they got a backpack is because they have to register. So there's a fine line there, how you handle it, but we've done pretty well at it. We provide guys, when they get out, contact information for all the things they need. People that are going to be homeless, first and foremost, registration is the most important thing, because registration or failure to do so could cost you your freedom in a minute. We've been very, very lucky in circumstances where a client was mentally challenged or had his own circumstances, and he would lose his thing. It's hard to hold on to all your paperwork when you're homeless. It really is. And if you don't learn or have the skills to make good records in your phone or whatever the case may be, those things happen. So over time, believe it or not, we built a rapport with the police department. We built a rapport with the Boston Municipal Court, where they don't want to see people coming in there for a failure to register because a guy was 2 days late. You know, he didn't commit a new offense, get that out of here, is what a judge will say. But it all costs money. Someone goes for an arraignment, they get appointed counsel, then there's a continuance. It goes on and on. It just costs everybody money. So now the police department has gotten to the point where if you can find out quickly, you can intervene. Because their problem is once they issue a warrant, well, they can't get it back. That's it, it's gone. And then it has to go through a process. So that's been one of our really happy things. I also have to say, I've developed a really good working relationship with some people in the central office of the Department of Corrections. And I never thought I'd say that thing. I've spoken there on 2 occasions. I've been to luncheons there. And if the people that are on the front lines could have any influence on how the vast sums of money the state throws away, we would be in a much better situation than we are, but they don't. One guy got chastised for donating to us. And it's his own fault that they found out. He told on himself. But nonetheless, he got chastised. So you can't do that. Well, we work together day in, day out. I was talking with him on the way down here. I need his help. He needs my help. So it's a good working relationship. It's just, there are so many things wrong when it comes to reentry. There wasn't enough time to talk about it. And it's even more wrong when people who have to register get out. There are so many obstacles that they have to overcome. We've developed now a network of sex offender treatment counselors, social workers. Hi, Terrence. And all of those things are available as needed. We also put in people's contacts when they first come out, people that they knew from when they were incarcerated. So they have someone that they know already, that they have some relationship with, that they can talk to, they already trust. And invariably, there are bumps in the road. You know, the biggest bump in the road is probably GPSs. Only because, surprisingly to some people here, perhaps, GPS technology is horrible. Or at least the GPS that people on probation have to wear. It's an ankle bracelet that's made by 3M, believe it or not, the Post-it people. And there are so many places that you go, Walmart's in particular. They go inside the Walmart, they lose signal. Next thing you know, your ankles vibrate, you got to go outside. When we started having a lot of people go to Southampton Street Shelter, and this is pre-2019, because it's very hard to get in there now. Guys who get in, you lock your phone up at night so someone doesn't steal it. And their ankle bracelet goes off. Well, you can't go out at night. If you go out, you got to stay out. So I had the biggest fights with these people at Elmo in Clinton, Mass, of all places, and finally got them to back off on people. It's just absurd. You know, and they make things, that's just not for sex offenders, that's for everybody. Everybody has to wear GPS. It's just a horrible, horrible process. And it seems to me now that at least judges have become very aware of the flaws in the technology, and they're very willing to remove that condition of probation in most cases. So CPCS can be very helpful in that regard, by the way. And other than that, you know, we continue to go on. We continue to have lots of volunteers. Not enough sometimes, because what happens is when guys get out and they learn about life and they start building their own lives, well, they no longer have the time to volunteer in the middle of the day. So it's become difficult in that regard. And sometimes, Thursday, for example, there'll be 2 guys getting out of the treatment center. Thank goodness there's someone else willing to help. because I couldn't take two at once. No, that's for sure. And I'd rather than just talk and talk and talk. Do people have questions? And a lot of you guys I know because I picked you up when you got out, but those of you I don't know. Yes, Dan. Mm-hmm.
I understood that if you're on parole,
If you're on parole, that's correct. And I want to tell you a story, seeing as you brought it up. In April of last year, I picked a guy up at Gardner at the request of the institutional parole officer and the Department of Corrections. And he had served 41 years in prison before he made a parole. I drove him to Springfield and then to the CRJ program in West Springfield. In August, his parole officer violated him for association with me. And he is presently incarcerated. I do believe when it comes time for a full parole hearing, that things will work out. But in the meantime, this poor guy's back inside. And I have no explanation for how it happened. But I testified at a dozen parole hearings. I spent hours with field officers and their parolees making plans. Patrick Logan in Brockton has got to be the best parole officer in the state. And I met with him and his clients 3 times a week and we planned things. And he called me and said, look at your persona non grata. I don't know why, and I'm sorry, but don't even call the guys anymore. And that was that. But peer support is so important that they have to stop that Neanderthal thinking that if 2 felons get together after they served a long time, they're planning a bank robbery or worse. It's just wrong.
What percentage of those go back for technical violation?
Correct. Yep. I agree.
Mostly that's the same.
Mm-hmm.
Could be an uncle, it could be a cousin. They could only legally see brothers, sisters, fathers, and mothers. Not the ends of race them, not the cousin. But down with anybody like that, they get violated.
And it's arbitrarily applied. It can be in a sober house with 50 felons, and it's perfectly okay as long as they're getting paid. It's perfectly okay when they go to AA with 20 felons or NA or whatever AA they want to go to. That's all right. The parole board does this because it serves their purpose. And that's what I find. I'm going to let them know. I'll get to testify at this guy's hearing, which I hope he has a good lawyer. Will be in March or April. For a parole hearing, you are. If you're a lifer.
Oh, lifer, okay.
Absolutely, you are.
No, I know.
Yep.
That's what the lifer.
So going back to your mentioning of people who come out on parole, it's this obstacle of that your mentors have also got records. Has that continued to be a problem? I mean, has parole in any way accepted that what your program is in some way akin to AA, or do they simply regard you as we don't know who you are?
That's a great question. And the only thing I can figure out now is they never realized who I was, because they have overreacted here, that's for sure. But everybody at the DOC knew. There was no secret. So I don't know how it happened. But we'll get to the bottom of it. Paul?
Yeah, so, from what prisons or what places are most of the guys that you're working with come from?
Well, the vast majority come from the treatment center. But we get people from Old Colony Correctional Center. We get people from Norfolk. We get people from all the county facilities. And Gardner.
So you actually go down there and pick them up?
Gardner's nice, it's only 5 miles from where I live. Everywhere else is a hike. Yeah. Yeah, I go and pick them up. I have a liaison that I can call, and make arrangements for what time. And generally speaking, they're pretty good about it. You know, if I say I'm gonna be there at 10, yeah, I'm ready at 10. You know, things happen. There's emergencies or lockdowns, or whatever you want to call them. They interfere sometimes, but other than that, they're pretty good.
So now you pick them up, but now you gotta bring them somewhere.
Well, that's all part of the transition planning. To me, there's more to a lawyer's job than just helping the client get out. Helping the client to get out to go somewhere that has structure is way more important to me. And slowly but surely, that's coming around. The DOC is really pushing that no one can go without having a physical address. And although that's probably illegal, because you can register as homeless, it's not a bad thing. It's getting harder to get into the shelters. If you're not from Boston, for example, good luck getting into Southampton. Pine Street is a little more accommodating, at least in the winter, because they have an amnesty program where you get in there no matter what, and you're in like a day room for a couple days, and then you get a bed or a mat. But it's really hard. And placing somebody in Cambridge, for example, if we had to put a guy in Cambridge, be in a lot of trouble. They don't accept us. Terrence, did you have a question?
Yeah, two questions. So one, do you think there's going to be any change now that the Bristol VA and Barnstable VA have changed over in terms of treatment in the facilities? You've got Gallagher, Barnstable, and you've got Paul Road in Bristol. And then secondly, I know that you have been intimately working on recidivism studies on people released from the treatment center and other facilities. Any, I think it was you and Eric. Anything coming of that? Oh, did I see the, no. Caruso Sheriff and Galloway the DA. And what's her name? She just won.
Paul Heroux is gonna be the best sheriff they ever had in Bristol County, first of all. I'm gonna tell you that right now. And I know him a long time. I was at his house working on legislative committees, playing with his dog. I mean, just a nice guy who's committed to making change. Bristol County was a horror show, absolute horror show. The reentry services there were next to nil. Absolutely did nothing. And the sheriff was a tyrant. We all know that. So it can only go up. He's been involved very heavily with an organization called PACA in New Bedford. In fact, he was just on a panel with, I got a thing today. He's going to be on another one, I think. And he also is involved with, in the PACA building, there's a sober house enterprise called There Is a Solution. It's run by Nate Costas. They just opened up a sober house in Roxbury on Maple Street. And they will be sex offender and arsonist friendly. We already have 2 people in the Maple Street address. They apparently have unlimited funding. They're going to open up like 4 more sober houses all over the state. So that's going to be a thing that Paul Heroux will tap into immediately. And so far, so good. You know, it's going to depend upon making culture changes in the officers who work there. I think a lot of the officers of Bristol County subscribe to the same ideology as the sheriff. So that's going to take time. But for those of you who don't know, Paul used to work for the Department of Corrections, and he was a statistician. At one time, he wanted to do a study on the effectiveness of programming. Not to say this is good or bad, just to do the effectiveness. If it's not good, let's try something else. DOC said no, he said goodbye. He wouldn't work there.
How about housing, Bill? Have you been able to develop contacts with people find housing?
Yes, but nowhere near enough. Almost nothing in Boston anymore. Even Commonwealth Land Trust, which used to be more open, they don't have a turnover. Bottom line, one of their facilities is on the backside of the State House on Bowden Street, I think. And there's like 3 buildings there. And I don't know what the rent is now. They have on-site management 5 days a week. But nobody leaves. You know, I bet they're only paying $600 a month for a room. Even now. And you can't find anywhere. I got a place in Lynn. We probably have, I don't know, 14 guys now. The management is very friendly. I can get anybody in there as long as there's an opening. This guy has 2 places in Lynn, but one of the places has federal contract beds, which is a landlord's dream because they pay for the beds whether they have bodies in them or not. But there just isn't enough places. I'm very fortunate in that my present landlord bought the house that I'm in so that people who are on the registry could have somewhere to live cheap. But so there's now 5 of us there. But that's, you know, that's only a Band-Aid, you know, on an artery that burst. There's just so much need.
Is the main problem just the lack of affordable housing or the fact that these guys have been convicted of sex offenses?
Oh, it's a good question. Probably a combination of the both. But I'll tell you, if you had $2 or $3 million and you could buy a house and convert it into a rooming house and have a business plan that said, we get 42 guys here can pay $400 a month and we can make the mortgage, blah, blah, blah. You could find a business plan. But the state has so much property they could donate. The city has property they could donate. Nobody stepped up.
Have you run into any problems though with communities objecting to people living there?
I remember several years ago, and I'm going to put the town right out there, North Reading. My cellmate lives in North Reading, or lived in North Reading, and it still does. And I registered it as a secondary address. He was still inside, I was out. I used to go up there and look out for the cats when his mother went up to open up a cabin in Maine. So anyway, it got out and they went nuts. The town went crazy. And then Bobby is his name. When he got out, they posted threats on Facebook and what have you. The chief of police said, no. He called a town meeting. And he said, these guys are all in compliance with the law. All of that stuff on Facebook has to come down. If I see it again, you're going to get arrested. So he really did a good job. And that's rare. The worst place I ever heard since Osterville. We had a guy in Osterville that the police went by his house every day. They posted pictures on poles, trees, parked cars outside. And he lasted about a week. Another guy in Middleborough who got out, who now lives in JP, but his family owned a fairly successful construction business, and he went to live with his brother. And somebody in the Middleborough Police Department put him out, and everybody went nuts. He lasted maybe 2 or 3 days. He didn't have to go.
That happened in Brookline.
Yeah.
but things have changed in Brookline. Things have changed in Boston. When I first came out, you know, if you went into a police station, like the station 14 where I lived on, where I lived in, my picture was on the board. They're not on the board anymore. They're not there. If you want to find out about them, you have to ask the sergeant on duty. And he can show you, that you have to give a reason why you want to do it. But the pictures are not there anymore. But the pictures, when I first moved into Austin, my picture was on the board. If you walked right in the station, my picture was right there. My neighbor said, because I was talking to my neighbor, says, I'm a fifth level 3 detective. I said, we knew you're not the police station, so you picture. And we're still best friends. So, so the other thing is that I was thinking, the public do not realize that when people are released from prison, they have no identity. Absolutely no identity. They have nothing to prove who they are. They give you an ID from the prison. That isn't worth the paper it's on.
Except at the bank if you have a check.
At Santana Bank, that's the only bank that will take it.
Now M&T Bank.
But you know,
Yep.
you know.
Sure, I know what you mean.
So I think one of the things that I had to learn, and you help with a lot of other people, is one of the things that getting an ID for the person. How do we get an ID, even if it's just a mass ID? Now, the way I got it was so interesting. I went in to get it, and they said, "Well, can you prove where you live?" And I took out my sex offender listing when I was temporary in Everett. I said, "Here's my thing." The guy talked to the supervisor, and they accepted it.
Well, it's on the government website. I mean, how could they deny it?
You know, that's where I was living temporarily at the time, and they said, so I got the ID. But a lot of people don't have that, and sometimes it takes, if they're in a shelter, it takes a long time to get someone to give them a letter to show that they were living there, that they do have a physical address.
Well, there are things going on about that. Now, I've probably gotten 3 guys from the Mass Treatment Center in the last 6 months who got out with a birth certificate, social security card, and Mass ID.
So that's good.
And there was a proposal. I just had a meeting with DOC and some probation people that they're going to have a van from the registry go around to each facility and be able to do it. And they think that's 6 months out. But in the meantime, if they put the paperwork in, it's a 5-week turnaround. And a lot of guys are getting out of state prison, not the treatment center, but state prison with mass IDs. Well, it's improving,
That's a big improvement.
but it's still such a struggle. And
Because you can't get, if you don't have an ID, you can't get into a government building.
if you don't have a real ID starting March of 2025 or May of 2025, now you won't get in either.
You know, but you can't get into a government building, and if you're eligible for Social Security, how the hell can you get to Social Security if you don't have an ID,
Exactly.
even though you have your Social Security card?
Yep.
It takes a lot of work to keep doing that, and a lot of guys don't have that. They give up.
COVID compounded all of them. Now there are 40 procedures done online at the registry. They're never going back to the way it used to be because they've discovered they can get the customer to do the work and just get the money.
That's good or bad for your finding?
Well, for mass IDs, it's bad. You have to make an appointment. And as Bob just said, oftentimes, guys don't have enough of the things that they require in order to get the service that they're asking for. And then even after they get the mass ID, you run into the same problem again going for a learner's permit. You gotta do it all over again. You have to go there with these documents. You have to pay them. They give you a piece of paper with a number on it and say, go take the test online. There's no more tests, you know, at a computer and all that stuff. You gotta get so many right. It's all done online.
It's the same way with applying for a job, everything's online,
Exactly.
you know, and if the person's been in for 40 years, they don't even know how to get online. Although some of them, now there's a few more things going on right now.
Oh, you're right.
But there weren't, some of the stuff wasn't available when you were out of it.
I have to
That's
make a
true.
question about pictures, but I used to teach high school in Stoughton, and they used to put pictures of people who had registered in our mailroom, and the faculty mailroom.
Hmm.
Is that still, do you think that's still happening, that kind of thing?
Certainly not as often. You know, I recently had a conversation with some people at Sex Offender Registry Board, and we were talking about classifications. And I said, look, classification doesn't matter anymore. Probably to go from a 3 to a 2, that's a pretty good deal because that stops active dissemination. What that means is that the police department can actively disseminate your information if they choose to do so. A lot of places don't do it anyway, but the ones who do, they can do that. Once you get to level 2, doesn't matter. Nobody goes on the SORB site looking for people anymore. They Google you. So all of this, and they hated to hear that, but they agreed with me that their numbers are nowhere near what they used to be about people accessing their website on a weekly basis. And I didn't know that when I said it, but I just knew that people Google people. They don't bother going through all the trouble of, I'm not a robot, and go through the pick out cars or motorcycles. Don't want to know that bad. Or you could just Google it and none of that stuff.
When you Google it, does it come up that they're on the registry?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And it'll always do that. If you become a level 1, if you get relieved of your obligation to register, it's still gonna be there. And you know,
It never goes away.
yeah, exactly. So at some point, it's all pretty meaningless. And I talk to a lot of our clients about it. They get all stressed. So just live your life. Do the right thing. Sex offenses and murder are prohibited. I think it's Mass General Law 276, 100A. If I have take a guess off the top of my head, the legislature would have to change that.
But it's also the problem of just private background checks in general, because it's not based on accurate current information necessarily. It's based on information that's just out there. And they're just kind of grabbing whatever's available. So it's not updated necessarily.
Isn't that what the sex offender board now is trying to do, tell a person asking right now, today, not 40 years ago. For years, they used to do it that way. Make the classifications of the, on what your crime was, but not how you acting today. The crime might have been 40 years ago.
Well, you opened up a can of worms there. I mean, I think that the problem with the Sex Offender Registry Board might not even be them. It's the CMRs, the Code of Mass Regulations, that govern their agency. Too many parts of that CMR are subjective. And you could take the same set of circumstances and present it to 2 different hearings officers and get 2 different results. And that's what's wrong with, you know, their whole CMR.
Is that related to classification?
Yes. Carrie?
Oh, yes, I have a very specific question that is related to the work we did, but one thing that we come up against a lot is that, treatment programs may ask for people's sex offender registry history. They'll ask for criminal record information, like substance use differences, which they're not necessarily supposed to be asking about Corey, beyond kind of what they can access as advocacy around if our clients have had sex offender registration requirements or do currently, and if we know, for instance, that even if we don't say, they'll Google it, so we might have to do a little advocacy around kind of conceptualizing our client. What would you recommend for that situation? Say, apply for, trying to get into substance use treatment, and they find out, or they're asking about sex offender registry requirements. What do you do in that circumstance?
Well, it's a tough call. Generally, I tell people to be honest. There's nothing worse than getting invested in housing or a program, and then the dirt comes out, and then that's it, you're gone. So it's better to bite the bullet on the front side than it is to get caught by the bullet on the backside, so to speak.
Have you done any work around kind of trying to understand, you've talked to, DPH and Bureau of Substance and Alcohol Services about why programs are allowed to restrict applicants to sex offender registry requirements. And DPH contends that they don't have any kind of regulation that would bar sex offenders from coming into treatment programs continue to do that. Do you know about any advocacy around that particular issue?
No, I've argued about it. One of the things that I've argued about, there's a program called Mass Alliance of Sober Housing, MASH. When someone is now released from custody, be it a sex offender or not, anybody, and they go to a MASH certified sober home, they're entitled to a grant that pays for their housing for 8 weeks.
Through probation.
But all MASH certified sober homes play by different rules. So they don't have to accept sex offenders. Some do, some don't. And I have argued vehemently about that. If you're gonna give them that grant money, well, then make them all toe the line to have the same set of standards. Nobody wants to hear it, especially the Office of the Commissioner of Probation.
Bill, how many people have you been served in one way or another since the BRN started?
Oh, my goodness. Well, since 2018, I think we're right around 306 right now, men and women. Before that, I didn't keep records. I mean, I didn't know where this was going, but I could. From 2013 to 2018, I'm very comfortable in saying there had to be another 200 people. And we get a lot of other little things, people want to go on vacation. What do I have to do? What's the registration like in Idaho? Or whatever it happens to be. I use a lot of Narsal stuff on their wiki page, whatever.
Yeah.
So if you counted that stuff, God knows. I have no idea.
How many people have you think you've had personal contact with, either picking them up or bringing them someplace, or meeting them someplace, or that type of thing?
I can say 500 comfortably.
And out of those 500, how many do you know of that have sexually reoffended?
Less than 15.
Bill, I have a question for you. One question was, regarding shelters. I have a client in Fall River who, was in a shelter there, and they were backed up with COVID on Corey checks, and so he was able to stay there until the time when they finally checked his Corey, and they saw that he had a sex offense on his record, and he said he could stay here, and so now he's sleeping on shelter. And so one question is that even legal, or is there any recourse to advocate for?
It happens all the time. If he's willing to go to New Bedford, Sister Rose's place in New Bedford is sex offender friendly, and it's a nice program.
You had mentioned, there is a solution, if the funding place for both, what exactly is that?
They're online, you can call, that's for sure. They like referrals from a social worker, generally speaking, but oftentimes, when our guys get out, we get a referral from inside the institution. The feds have more money than God. They can just, let's make it familiar in Boston. On Huntington Ave, there's a place called Coolidge House. It's been there forever. It's a halfway house, transition house, whatever you want to call it. It used to be state inmates. Now it's all federal. The entire building is all federal inmates. So they stay there. It's run by CRJ, Community Resource for Justice. They stay there until they find whatever. And when they use up their 9 months there, the feds have contract beds where they can go somewhere else.
I hear that, you have a sex offense on your record that never to be expunged or never been settled.
Not that I know of. A governor's pardon, maybe.
I think the same client following the applies to the court, you know, that he's told that I'm going to be able to do this application for the few months that you're saying the sex offense is the only thing, and that's never been come off his record.
I'm sure 276 100A is the law.
I think it was.
Yes. Well, the record would show. Norma?
Another question on that. And then I have one other client who, he had a sex offense back in 1986. He, been incarcerated for over 30 years. I think he finally got out 6 years. Well, I may not have the story too, but he's failed to register. I think he was supposed to last appear on October 18th, and he hasn't done so. And I was wondering what the best I could help this situation right now.
The only charge was failure to register. That's it. He didn't commit a new crime. He didn't shoplift. He didn't commit a sex offense. He didn't do anything wrong.
Whether employees have charges of assault and battery, so and why he failed to register because of the.
He's in trouble. He has a choice to make. I would suggest if you can try and get a good lawyer, negotiate his surrender and make the best deal possible. It's never going away. He's going to live his life doing this all the time. Take responsibility for what he did. Hopefully get a good judge. Do his time and go on with his life. But if it was just failure to register, there's a lot of leeway. But not with new crimes. No. He's in trouble. Norma?
Yeah, I was wondering why you think, the park corrections isn't funding the work you're doing. Or after doing, like, what should they tell you to do doing all that work?
Well, we haven't gone up the ladder far enough. Is it Undersecretary Peck? Is that his name? Once the dust settles with the new election, we'll try. There's going to be a new commissioner, you would think.
But some problems in the inside, we should have, governor deal with that. Or have an executive. Also, the public safety, should have the same. I don't know, I mean. but
Well, no, it's a great question. The culture in the DOC is sort of chain of command stuff. And you know that Claire and Paul, you at least know Claire, they advocated for us everywhere they could. And they were just told to,
But you didn't apply for all that money to see the investment act, like last year, 2 years ago.
and the answer is, I don't know. We did apply for the Mayor's Office for Returned Citizen, and I think we're gonna get some there. They have to give away like $1 million, I guess, before June of the next year. Well, I was flabbergasted that their $300,000 budget went from there to 2.6 million. And at least as I hear it, it was the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization that was the driving force behind all that. You know, I don't know. I hear a lot of things. I'm close to some people in the mayor's office of returning citizens, and the new director is not any more sex offender friendly than the last one. So it is what it is. But they're gonna, I'm 90% certain to get some money.
So do you have an office to do the work?
No,
Are,
my car,
Oh, wow. There you go.
40,000+ miles a year in my car.
Oh. And you're able to keep up with all that, I mean, that sounds like an awful lot of work. Keep up with it all yourself.
No, well, we have a working board of directors. And everybody on the board of directors is smarter than I am, so that's great. I have to do daily data. I set up phones, set up emails, you know, for the phones for all the people that get out.
Yeah.
You know, that's time consuming. But, you know, I do want to have my coffee in the morning.
You also have some volunteers.
Yes,
No staff, just you?
That's that, I think.
no paid staff,
but you
and
didn't get paid.
I haven't been paid since 2018.
So you're working board of directors, you mean they're working on the work you're doing?
Well, they have other jobs, but they do data collection. We're going through now a database check with contact. As the list gets bigger and bigger, it's really hard. So we have one person doing that. We have another person doing our client database. And then we have fields across the database that are relevant, you know, probation, no probation, level, sex offender, are they going to treatment, etc. We have another person that manages our phone list. And I get to every so often play with it. I don't really like, to be honest, sitting there plugging numbers into a spreadsheet is not my cup of tea. I'm a grunt. I'm a boots on the ground guy. But I can do it if I have to.
But you do the active work of actually collecting people from business, taking them to.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of hours.
Yeah, when you pick up someone from prison, you gotta figure that's gonna take you a day to write up, right?
It's an entire day now because
It's about a day.
everybody who gets out of prison who was sentenced after 2006 is getting out with probation and GPS. Probation post-COVID has become a 45-minute intake questionnaire, data gathering, whatever you want to call it. That for some people is easy, some people it's very hard. They may have their own set of challenges. And when they go into probation, the probation officer is not equipped, the intake person, with a lot of information. So they're expecting everybody to just zip right through this. And you got someone who can't read maybe, or English is their second language. So I try to go in with them and smooth out those bumps.
I think a lot of the people who on the probation who are doing the intake are probably probation officers in training. They're not really probation officers, they're in training. And they get the sucker job, it's just a sucker job. Doing intake is a terrible job, but you have to do it, it has to be done.
And then the GPS, this is unbelievable. They put it on the man or woman, and they say, now you have to go outside and walk around until they get a signal. How does that work? You're putting on a global positioning thing. It's activated. Why can't they get the signal right away? I don't know. And, you know, it could be inclement weather. The guy could get out with no jacket. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why those are bad ideas in my mind.
Most of the probation officers really agree with you, it's a pain in the ass for them,
Yes, they
the
do.
whole thing. And as the commissioner, Boston Police Commissioner in Boston once said, it does not prevent crime at all.
It doesn't.
Just tell us who you are, that's all it does, it does, there's no prevention at all.
And they don't have access to real-time information. They don't have access to real-time information. Only Clinton does.
So it's done. And the former police commissioner in Boston said that they used it to find people concerned. So that they suspected someone, and they had to go to Clinton to find out, because it wasn't in the Boston police job. You know, which took another, detective half a day job to go and do that. When they could have been done doing something.
I agree.
You know, and it doesn't prevent crime. And a lot of people just take the damn thing off and go commit a crime, and no one knows where they are anyway.
Good transition helps reduce crime. Good planning.
By the way, one of the best things that the state legislature did this past year was take away the
Probation fees. I'm sure everyone agrees with that. Yep.
What do I, now it's gone. Thank you for that.
Everyone on probation had to pay $65 a month.
$65 a month, and we're all going. And then you had to go to food, and that's $39 for CPC now, $39 a session. So figure that out. So a lot of people are paying that out of pocket, and they're not making a lot of money. You know?
Or they may not have a job.
Well, if they don't have a job, they can,
Community service.
Mass Health will take care of it. And then the judge waives the probation, will just waive the probation fee. Another judge don't have to waive the probation fee anymore.
Well, some counties, they would not let the judge do that. They'd make you go out and clean the street for $10 an hour or whatever it was,
well,
community service.
That was in Suffolk County, they put you on to just picking up or cleaning the graffiti off the wall.
Mhm.
But well, community service, they call it. Yeah. But, and Mass Health will pay for the, is the only insurance who will pay for sex offender treatment. The only insurance. There is no other insurance pays for it.
Tough senior health care options. And you're old enough to know about it.
Yeah, but I'm not on tough things.
I know.
I try to get it through tough, and they wouldn't, they get refused every single time.
It's a fabulous plan, but you have to be
I'm
poor.
not gonna complain.
I agree. Any other questions?
So Bill, I have a question on civil commitment, but I wanted to make sure that everyone else got a chance to ask any questions or make any points they wanted to explore. Because Nassau is doing a major campaign now, trying to get rid of post-prison civil commitment. Could you explain, a lot of the guys you're dealing with have been in civil commitment, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something on top of their jail sentence.
Correct.
And so is it still that you can be lifetime civil commitment?
In Massachusetts, it's a date of life, yes.
So, what, could you explain, I mean, a lot of people don't believe that this exists. In other words, they think that people getting out of prison, like the people you're talking with, have just finished their sentence. But in fact, a lot of them have been coming from the treatment center civilly committed, right?
Correct.
So how does that process work?
Well, in Massachusetts, there are laws that say if you have been convicted of certain enumerated offenses, all being sexual or the legislature thought sexual in nature, you could be petitioned by the district attorney's office of the county where you were sentenced to evaluate you on whether or not you are sexually dangerous. That's governed under Mass General Law 123, I want to say section 12 through 14, maybe. And what happens is, in the initial process, the district attorney hires their own expert, and you choose to see him or not, and they give an evaluation on whether they think you were sexually dangerous, and that's called the probable cause stage. If probable cause is found, and often it is, you then are committed to the treatment center as a temporary civil commit.
This is after you finish your sentence.
Oh, yes. Well, if they're gonna petition you, they're supposed to, by statute, petition you 6 months prior to your release. It rarely happens. I saw it recently happen in December to a guy that he was being released. For me, it happened 3 weeks before my release, come to think of it.
I saw guys, the day they were being released.
Yeah.
They were moved over to the city.
Exactly. So that process, it's far more complicated. At that point, your lawyer is allowed to hire experts. The state has experts, and you have a trial. If you're found to be dangerous, you're committed for day to life. And then, in theory, you can apply for your release every year thereafter, but in practice, you're lucky to get a trial every 3 years. And if the jury keeps finding you dangerous, you stay there forever.
So, in this case, I'm telling us now, there seems to be less people being committed.
Well, the civil count is way down. The civil count is probably down to 130,
Well, the
132.
reason I said is because I correspond with someone who's in MCC, and they're living on the, what we used to call the commitment side. Now.
Yeah, D and C.
So,
D and half a C.
so it's different, that means that the inmates are living with the non-inmates. Yeah.
Yes.
Which is against the law, right?
Well, they claim they separate them, have separate movements.
Which is not really true.
Oh, of course it's not.
But what I'm getting at is, according to if someone is civilly committed, then basically they're saying that this person is the worst of the worst, right?
Correct. Just hang it up, hang it up. So I forgot to turn it off. I'm sorry.
But see, this is why the recidivism stuff that you're developing is so important.
Well, that's very true.
Because that's how they justify civil commitment, that each one of these persons is especially dangerous. And therefore they can justify keeping them. In our state, people can get out from time to time. In most states where there's civil commitment, maybe 1 or 2 people will get out a year.
I understand. Minnesota especially.
And so the recidivism piece would undermine a lot of that justification for civil commitment. If the recidivism is very, very low for people who have been in the treatment center.
That's true.
Reported accurately.
Yes,
It's never really reported accurately. We all know that the citizen rate is just because we said was barely under 1%.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's never really reported because basically it doesn't work in their favor to report it accurately.
I agree. You're right, Ron.
Like I kind of understood why they don't do the study, because then all Mary Murray has to say is, see, this process works. The recidivism rate is 1%, we've been doing everything right.
But they've known it for years.
Oh, yeah.
They don't want, it doesn't work for money wise, just like the grant, it doesn't work for their advantage, so they don't allow it in. But they can make sure that the information is not disseminated.
Well, thanks for all the work you're doing. I said, thanks for all the work you're doing.
Thank you, Norma.
We give you a raise.
The other thing, I work with Phil once in a while, we can volunteer with him. It's so interesting how some of the people that I've picked up and taken them and got them through the process, we're still in contact, I'm still in contact. And this is, I'm talking 10 years ago.
Mhm.
One of them just sent me a good night, Bill probably got a good night, Bill.
That might have been what that was. Who knows? I get a good morning from the same guy.
Yeah, but it's so nice. though.
It is.
Sometimes I say, oh, God, it might out of use it for a thing, yeah, oh, Jack sending me good morning, because, I'll hear it click on. And then I'll say, hey, you found me this morning, isn't that nice? So I send it back to him.
The only part I don't like about it, he sends those two little smiley
Oh,
faces.
yeah, you get it twice.
So I have a GPS that reads my emails and text to me in the car, so I can keep my hands on them. But if you send any kind of picture, it won't do anything.
Oh.
So I never get his until the next time I stop.
But, I bring it up because I've been doing that with a couple of guys that kind of have a problem, sexual problem. And I've been just, I'll send a good night, and they'll send it back.
Oh, yeah.
It's nice to hear from someone's thinking of.
I should have saved you my holiday texts. Well, because, uh-oh.
But there's all kinds of things that can be done. Billy and I have cookouts, especially in my backyard. And if a lot of people ever knew that there were like 15 breakfast vendors sitting in the backyard, not bothering anybody, and there's no alcohol involved in that, and everybody's having a good time. And you never know who these people are. And we're having a good time. Okay? And the only thing we have in common is we're all in prison around the same time.
I agree.
That's the only thing we have in common. It can be done. And my probation officer thinks it's wonderful.
Well, she's a great probation officer on top of that. You're lucky.
But, but those things can be done. And you have a good time. It's just opening up your house to someone, or opening up your arms to someone, and saying, come along and talk,
9 Thanksgivings in a row. You know where I've been for Thanksgiving, and all sex offenders and 1 homeless woman. And we've done it every year.
So we say, there's a positive side to this whole thing, which I like to get. There's a lot of negatives in it, and there's a lot of problems, but there's a positive side to it. And I like to look more on the positive side of things.
Oh, I think you're right, Bob.
There's a lot of good things happen, and a lot of people feel about things. Even before I go over here, I got a text that I talked to someone, and just working with Kathy, and trying to get some information to the person to get some more information. And I town. You gotta help, get the guy help, so he does now. This is what the,
The best thing that happened was Kathy getting that job.
yeah.
She's way better at it than I would have been.
Kathy Williams works for CPCS and helps people in the treatment center, first of all, to prevent them from getting committed, but mainly with people that are in the treatment center that
But she's
help
also.
them show that they should be out.
She's a very positive lady.
Yeah.
Very positive.
She's a-
Amazing, and she works very closely with Bill.
Yes,
And
She's a
that makes
superstar.
a big difference. And so, you can see what an incredible shoestring operation this thing is, right?
Yeah.
You can imagine how many people's lives have been touched by it. And, so I think it's important that people know about what people can do. And look at all the networking that Bill is doing with providers and all this to set up a real infrastructure to handle people that are facing very, very difficult circumstances.
Especially when they first come out.
I can't imagine how scary that must be.
Yeah.
So anyway, if people here are not yet volunteering for this, but would like to volunteer, there's a sign-up sheet over here for people that would be interested in writing to people who are in civil commitment. Kathy Williams, that we're just talking about, has a list of people that would like it. And if people would be willing to do that, there's another sign-up sheet for that. And then there's some leaflets over there about this big 3-day event in Washington, DC, March 5th, 6th, and 7th, trying to bring the different reform groups together. So Bill has to drive back to, are you going back to Fitchburg tonight?
yes, I
You're
am.
not sleeping in your car in the backyard here? So thank you so much, Bill. Really appreciate it.